Hi crew, I'm out again today. I got a sick kiddo at home. I'll be there tomorrow. For today, you have another flip lesson to start your new notes on World War I, the Russian revolutions, the interwar years, and the causes of World War II. It's kind of a big unit, and we're kind of skipping over the war stuff a little bit and really focusing on the whys and the effects of it. So when it comes to the start of World War I or the Great War, most people are actually kind of happy that war is breaking out. There's been a lot of nationalism. A lot of people have been preaching, my country is the best. There's been this scramble for colonies and this push for industrialization. And really, most people, war is something that, like, great grandpa talks about. It's not something that they fully get the dirty side of. There's a very kind of romantic view of war. So the war breaks out with the Sarajevo event, the assassination of Archduke Francis Ferdinand and his wife by Gavrilo Princip in the Black Hand. So World War I happens between 1914 and 1918. There's about 9 million soldiers that die, but millions and millions more show up home crippled, and they survived the war. See, this is kind of unique about World War I. World War I is kind of the first major war where we have penicillin and we understand cross-contamination and sanitizing our medical equipment. So for the first time, we have casualties that make it home. This isn't just some romantic, oh, he died a beautiful death, and the guy that comes home is missing an eye. These are people who are missing limbs, who are permanently disfigured. And it kind of takes away that romantic view of war. World War I also sees a lot of weapons being used for the first time. Airplanes are used for spying, lightweight bombing. It's new that they're used for combat. This is the air dog fights in the sky, the Red Baron and that kind of stuff. You see tanks, but not so much tanks in the way that we use them today. For World War I, they're more of a way to set off mines safely and to tear down that barbed wire, so your troops would really kind of walk behind them as a form of protection. Machine guns. These are really inaccurate because of the vibrations, but they're good for sweeping, and we see this with the trench warfare. And submarines, also known as Unterwasserboats or U-boats. This is the first kind of true submarine. Submarines had been around since the American Revolution, actually, but we hadn't really used them as a large kind of military weapon until really World War I. So at the start of the war, the Germans are having a lot of success against France and England, but things are not going so well with Russia. So they get help from the Ottoman Turks, who are going to block off, and you can kind of see with this arrow here, this section of land between the Ottoman Empire and the Russian Empire by the Black Sea. It does work. The Germans are allowed to focus on France and England, and they start winning. And the Russian people start to revolt against their government. Now, we're going to kind of take a side note here for a minute, and this is going to be kind of the strip of time, this area here, is where we start to have what's called the Armenian genocides. And historically, we don't speak about the Armenian genocides a whole lot, but we're going to today.
The Armenian Genocide was a mass extermination of Armenians, Assyrians, and Greeks carried out by the Ottomans from 1915 until 1923. It's often considered the first major genocide of the 20th century. This video won't be like my others, because it's almost impossible to predict how things would have been had this event not occur, so I'll leave you to ponder after I show the facts. This video is simply going to state the history. Armenia has existed for millennia. The predominantly Christian people lived in eastern Anatolia, being swept up by the numerous empires which conquered the land. At the end of the 19th century, the current rulers, the Ottoman Empire, began to collapse. Fearing a rise of Armenian nationalism, the Turks started cracking down on these people. During the 1890s, the government massacred hundreds of thousands of civilians. The treatment got even worse when a nationalistic group known as the Young Turks took control in 1908. Their goal was to purge the land of any non-Turks. Sound familiar? So once World War I broke out, by 1915 the Ottomans saw the Christian Armenians as a threat, fearing they would help the Christian Russians against Turkey. The genocide started when hundreds of Armenian intellectuals were killed on April 24, 1915. Laws were passed to fully depopulate Turkey of the Armenian minority. Villages were burned. Entire populations walked out into the desert left to die. Killing squads hunted down any survivors. Once again, sound familiar? Under the context of war, the Ottomans went on a mass genocide against those they deemed unworthy. 2 million Armenians lived in Turkey before 1915. 1.5 million were killed. Greeks and Assyrians who lived in the Anatolian Peninsula since Roman times faced mass killings as well. Around 450,000 Greeks were killed and 300,000 Assyrians, ending all three cultures in the region. Now, I'm sure many are thinking, this was 100 years ago. Why is it so significant? Today, the Turkish government, the successor of the Ottomans, deny to call these actions a genocide. Since Turkey is a NATO ally and controls some important chunk of land, other nations, United States included, are uneasy to drop the G word when discussing these events. Turkey actively goes out of its way to punish those who mention genocide, even their own citizens. Crazy, right? It's 2015. Simply refusing to accept that these actions are genocide means that a prominent government does not listen to history. The equivalent is Germany denying the Holocaust, cracking down on those who bring it up, and cutting diplomatic ties with nations who do. So what's the point of this video? To spread the common knowledge. Not many people know of the refusal of history happening today, so let's change that. People revise history every day to suit their needs, and that needs to stop. History is ugly, and every group, ethnicity, and nation has done something we're not proud of. But it's the 21st century, and in this modern world we need to accept events by what they were. Denying doesn't give closure, and it doesn't help us learn. Many countries are finally calling this a genocide, and many more will too. It's been 100 years of denial. Hopefully it won't be 101. This is Cody.
So one of the things that makes World War I different, by the way, it's considered a world war because all of those European nations had colonies all over the globe where they were pulling troops from, where they were sending troops to. And so for the first time, you do really have a war where just about everybody in the world is pulled in. Germany knows that it cannot compete with England's navy. England has the best navy in the world this time. So they're going to try to work around this by using submarines to cut off the supply lines to England. Now, Germany had been pretty clear, had posted a lot of warnings and such, that anybody who was sending war goods to England would be up for grabs. These war goods would be considered contraband. So the U.S. is secretly shipping supplies because England's our buddy. And you've probably heard the tale of the Lusitania, how this so innocent passenger liner gets sunk and the U.S. gets mad and we get involved in the war. Well, the reality is the Lusitania was carrying contraband. In fact, a submarine found the wreckage of the Lusitania not too long ago, and sure enough, in the bow of the boat are a bunch of boxes of rifles. So, yeah, the Germans did exactly what they said they were going to do. If you're carrying war goods, we're going to blow up the boat. Germany is going to kind of try and appease the U.S. from getting involved when we start throwing a fit about the Lusitania by doing the Sussex Pledge. The Sussex Pledge says the Germans are going to give non-war ships time to evacuate before they blow it up. They don't keep to this agreement. But they figure they can give the agreement and then ignore it, because if they can stop the U.S. from supplying England, they can end the war quickly, and then it's done. American newspapers go berserk, though. How horrible this was. They're blowing it out of proportion. This is called yellow journalism. Hopefully you remember this from when you took your U.S. history classes, probably most of you, last year. So this is yellow journalism. This is blowing things out of proportion, calling something a massacre when like 5 people die. So the official kind of straw that breaks the camel's back is the Zimmerman note. This was Britain's kind of like secret weapon. They intercepted a telegram between the German foreign secretary and the Mexican government saying that if Mexico would keep the U.S. busy and keep us out of a European war, the Germans would solve the European war and then come help the Mexicans beat the Americans, and then the Mexicans would get back a bunch of territory. Wilson has two choices when he gets this. He can turn this over to Congress, or he can turn it over to a newspaper. Wilson wants war, so he hands it to a newspaper who absolutely has a field day with it. Front page news, the whole bit. So the American people are outraged. The U.S. involvement, the resources and the men that the U.S. gives over, is what's going to tip the war in favor of the Allies. Okay, so that's the first page in notes, and that's as far as we're getting in notes today. And some of you are like, so what's this Russian thing on our calendar? I want you to take that personality quiz. There's so many different sides and so many different personalities involved in the Russian Revolution that I need you to have kind of a background understanding before we actually dive into the Russian revolutions. So if you would, at this point, if you haven't already, go into your Canvas calendar and take that personality quiz and then follow the directions of kind of what to do after you finish. And I'll see you tomorrow.